In a world that depends so heavily on refrigeration, it's easy to forget that for centuries people kept food fresh without ever opening a fridge door. Among the communities that still practice these time-tested methods, the Amish stand out. Not because they're holding on to the past, but because their ways continue to work, simply and effectively. Their approach isn't based on convenience or technology, it's shaped by rhythm, tradition, and a deep understanding of the natural world. Whether they're storing meat for winter, preserving the garden's bounty, or transforming milk before it spoils, the Amish rely on techniques that are both practical and sustainable. These aren't survivalist hacks or trendy homestead tips. They're everyday routines passed down through generations. Let's take a closer look at 6 enduring ways the Amish keep food fresh without ever plugging in a fridge. Number 1. Smoking meat turns it into long-term protein. For the Amish, smoking meat is far more than just giving it a rich, deep flavor. It's a carefully practiced method of preserving food that allows families to have access to high-quality protein throughout the year, even without refrigeration. It starts right after butchering, which is usually done in the colder months to naturally slow bacterial growth. Once the animal is cleaned and broken down, select cuts like hams, bacon, sausages, and sometimes entire quarters of beef are prepared for the smokehouse. These aren't just ice sheds with chimneys. Amish smokehouses are solid, purpose-built structures made of thick timber that traps smoke efficiently while allowing for proper airflow. Some have stone floors or packed dirt to maintain a stable environment inside. The wood choice is deliberate. Hardwoods like hickory, oak, maple, or applewood are favored not just for their aroma, but because they burn long and clean. The fire is kept low and steady, producing thick, cool smoke that slowly wraps the meat in a natural protective layer. The smoke dehydrates the surface, making it hard for mold or bacteria to grow, while also infusing phenols and acids that act as natural antimicrobials. It's not a fast process. Large hams can take up to 2 weeks to smoke properly. Sausages may only need a couple of days, but timing depends on weather, humidity, meat thickness, and airflow. Amish smokers know how to adjust without thermometers, by watching how the smoke curls, feeling the texture of the meat, and relying on instinct passed down from elders. Once smoking is finished, the meat doesn't go into plastic or vacuum bags. It's hung in pantries, cellars, or utility sheds where the air remains dry and cool. Sometimes it's wrapped loosely in cotton cloth to keep dust off but still let it breathe. Over time, smoked meats can continue to dry, becoming firmer and more flavorful. And when it's time to eat, there's no prep needed. They might shave off a few slices to serve cold with bread and pickles, or chop it into soups and stews simmering on the stove. It's this mix of functionality, tradition, and sheer practicality that makes smoked meat such a staple. It doesn't require electricity, batteries, or modern gadgets. Just wood, patience, and the kind of lived experience that can't be replaced by instructions on a package. Number 2. Vinegar preserves just about anything. In the world of Amish food preservation, vinegar isn't just a condiment. It's a cornerstone of how they keep a wide range of fresh foods shelf-stable without relying on refrigeration or artificial chemicals. While most people immediately think of cucumber pickles when they hear vinegar, the Amish have taken this humble liquid and turned it into a multi-purpose tool capable of preserving nearly anything that comes out of the garden or coop. Inside an Amish pantry, it's common to see shelves packed tight with jars containing not only traditional pickles, but also vibrant red beets, green beans, crunchy corn, banana peppers, garlic cloves, and even things that surprise outsiders like whole cherry tomatoes or slices of watermelon rind suspended in tangy brine. Each jar isn't just storage, it's part of a living tradition passed down through generations. The process is methodical but simple, which is part of its brilliance. Vegetables and other ingredients are cleaned, trimmed, sometimes lightly blanched, and packed tightly into hot, sterilized jars. Then, a boiling vinegar solution, usually based on apple cider vinegar mixed with salt, water, and a touch of sugar, is poured over them. The acidity of the vinegar creates a hostile environment for spoilage-causing microbes. Once sealed, the jars are left to cool, and as they do, a vacuum forms that further protects the contents. Unlike industrial processes that rely on preservatives and pasteurization equipment, this method leans entirely on acidity, cleanliness, and precision timing. And when done properly, the results can last not just for months, but for over a year without any refrigeration. Beyond the science, there's an element of craftsmanship involved. Each Amish family has its own version of a brine recipe. One household might infuse theirs with mustard seed, black pepper, or whole cloves. Another might use dill, garlic, or hot chili flakes to give it a spicier edge. Some recipes are closely guarded secrets, shared only within the family or passed from mother to daughter when she marries. This personalization brings variety to the same basic method and turns the act of preserving into an art form. Even hard-boiled eggs find their place here, peeled and soaked in spiced vinegar until their centers absorb the tangy flavor and turn a soft pink from beets or golden from turmeric. The Amish don't just use vinegar to store food, they use it to transform it, to build layers of flavor and texture, and to ensure nothing goes to waste. Number 3. Clay jugs and cool wells handle dairy. In a world without refrigeration, dairy might seem like the most fragile food group to manage, but in Amish communities, it's simply part of their rhythm. They've developed a reliable, hands-on system for keeping milk and dairy products fresh by relying on nature, timing, and clever use of materials like unglazed clay and naturally cold water sources. Fresh milk, still warm from the cow, is poured into porous clay jugs or stoneware crocks. These vessels aren't just containers, they actually help cool the milk. The slight moisture that seeps through the walls of the jug evaporates slowly, drawing out heat and lowering the internal temperature. It's an ancient cooling method, and in the Amish world, it's still entirely practical. The jugs aren't left sitting in the open. They're placed near cold wells or submerged partway in spring houses, structures built over flowing water that stays cold year-round. The ambient temperature in these spots usually hovers around 50 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, which is just enough to slow bacterial growth and preserve milk for a short window of time. But the Amish rarely try to store raw milk for more than a day or two. Instead, they use it quickly and efficiently. Cream is skimmed from the top by hand and set aside for churning into butter. The butter, once formed, is wrapped in thin cotton cloth or packed into small crocks, sometimes covered with brine or lined with fresh leaves to keep it cool and prevent spoilage. What they don't consume as fresh milk or butter, they transform almost immediately. Some of the milk is allowed to clabber, a controlled souring process that produces a thick, tangy base similar to yogurt. Clabbered milk is eaten with fruit, used in baking, or left to further separate into curds and whey. From there, it becomes cottage cheese or soft curd cheese. Amish families usually work in small daily batches, so nothing has a chance to go bad. If more milk is available than needed, it's offered to neighbors, turned into ghee, or even used to feed calves or pigs. Nothing is wasted. What's remarkable is how self-contained and responsive this system is. Instead of depending on long-term refrigeration or bulk storage, the Amish rely on timing, daily habits, and natural elements. It's not about extending shelf life unnaturally, it's about moving with the rhythm of the food and shaping their lives around what each day brings. Number 4. Burying in ground pits. Adds months of storage. When the option of building a full root cellar isn't practical, whether due to cost, time, or terrain, Amish families often turn to a more direct and surprisingly effective alternative. Ground pits dug right into the earth. This method, although deceptively simple, is rooted in generations of agricultural observation and seasonal timing. The principle behind it is clear. The soil below the surface maintains a relatively steady temperature, insulating crops from extreme cold during winter and shielding them from fluctuating warmth in early autumn. By working with the ground rather than against it, the Amish can extend the life of many hardy vegetables far beyond their natural shelf life above ground. To create these storage pits, they usually begin by selecting a well-drained area in the garden or close to the barn. The pit itself doesn't have to be massive, just deep enough to hold crates or baskets while allowing room for airflow and insulation. The walls are sometimes reinforced with wooden planks, though in many cases they simply line the entire cavity with thick layers of straw or dry hay. This organic padding cushions the produce, absorbs moisture, and helps regulate temperature inside the pit. Once filled with food, typically hardy root vegetables like cabbages, rutabagas, turnips, or even beets, the pit is then sealed off. The top is covered with wooden boards or sometimes pieces of metal roofing, followed by an extra blanket of straw and finally a mound of packed earth to lock it all in place. What's impressive is how long this method works without needing any electricity, climate control, or synthetic preservatives. The buried vegetables stay fresh for months, accessible whenever needed. Families usually mark each pit's location clearly and may dig separate ones depending on the crop's moisture tolerance. Since mixing cabbage with something like onions could cause cross-contamination or spoilage if moisture builds up. Once sealed, many of these pits remain untouched until deep winter, when other supplies begin to run low. At that point, the family might open the top, reach in with gloved hands, and pull out firm, cold vegetables as if they'd just been harvested. There's no machinery involved, no complex infrastructure, just an understanding of how to use the earth's natural properties to preserve what was grown in it. For the Amish, this isn't a backup method or a makeshift solution. It's a deliberate, tested practice that fits perfectly within their seasonal cycles and their philosophy of self-reliance. Number 5. Natural rind and wax keep cheese fresh. In Amish households, cheese isn't just a food item, it's a slow-crafted product of patience, intuition, and tradition. Without refrigerators or plastic packaging, long-term storage of dairy might seem like a logistical nightmare, but for these communities, it's simply a matter of knowing the process. Their approach to cheese preservation is rooted in old-world methods that have been refined over generations. Most Amish families who make cheese at home begin with fresh, raw milk from their own cows or goats. This milk is turned into curds through natural coagulation methods, using either rennet or acidic cultures, and then pressed into forms to create dense, compact wheels. These are not soft, short shelf-life cheeses. They're deliberately firm, dry-aged varieties meant to withstand time. After the pressing, the wheels are moved into a cellar or a cool, shaded pantry where the air is dry and still. Over time, a natural rind begins to develop, a protective outer layer that forms as moisture gradually leaves the cheese and the surface dries. This rind isn't just cosmetic. It serves as a barrier against air and bacteria, allowing the interior of the cheese to age slowly without contamination. Some cheeses are left to form their rind naturally and are simply brushed and turned every few days to maintain their shape and prevent one side from becoming too moist or moldy. Others are treated with a coating of melted beeswax or even pork lard, sealing them entirely. This added layer prevents excessive drying, while still allowing for the cheese to breathe slightly, just enough to mature gracefully. Storage is hands-on and personal. Amish homemakers flip each cheese wheel by hand on a regular schedule. This isn't done by timer or calendar, it's based on look, feel, and even sound. Tapping the cheese gives subtle feedback about internal texture. A dull sound may signal excess moisture, while a clean ring tells them the cheese is aging correctly. If mold appears, it's handled without alarm. The surface is scraped or trimmed, the interior remains untouched and perfectly good. There's no fear of imperfection, only respect for the aging process. Months later, when a wheel is finally opened, it often has a deep, nutty aroma and a sharp, concentrated flavor that reflects the milk, the air, the time, and the hands that made it. It's cheese that speaks of a season, a cellar, and a deliberate way of life. Preserved not through packaging, but through skill and time. Number 6. Daily cooking prevents the need for storage. Among the many techniques the Amish use to keep food fresh without modern appliances, one of the most quietly effective and often overlooked is their habit of cooking from scratch every single day. It's not a trend or lifestyle choice, it's simply the way things have always been done. Their kitchens aren't stocked with weeks' worth of frozen leftovers or shelves lined with pre-packaged meals. Instead, they work with what's immediately available, cook it fully, serve it while it's fresh, and use up whatever remains before the day is over. This continuous cycle of preparing and consuming meals daily leaves little opportunity for food to spoil. It may seem labor-intensive to outsiders, but for the Amish, this rhythm is second nature. The routine typically starts early in the morning, often before sunrise. Bread dough is kneaded and left to rise on warm countertops, and breakfast is made hot, sometimes with eggs collected that very morning, or slices of ham carved straight from a smoked slab. Any meat that's butchered that day is either eaten immediately or preserved before nightfall, whether it's canned, smoked, salted, or cooked into stews. Vegetables are pulled from the garden as needed. What isn't used raw is quickly blanched or cooked and incorporated into that day's meals. If there's milk from the morning milking, it's used for baking, churned into butter, or left out to naturally sour for cheese making. One of the reasons this method works so seamlessly is the size and structure of Amish families. Meals are prepared for large groups, often 6, 8, or even 12 people at a time. With many hands and hearty appetites, there's rarely any need to save leftovers. If something remains after dinner, it's typically eaten for lunch the next day or repurposed into a new dish, like soup or hash. Overconsumption and overproduction are deliberately avoided. Amish cooks have an instinct for portions, a sensitivity to waste, and a deep respect for every ingredient they use. Food is never taken for granted, and that care shows in how tightly they manage their kitchens. Rather than focus on preserving food after it's made, they emphasize using it immediately. This constant cycle eliminates the reliance on artificial cooling or storage systems. The kitchen isn't a place of storage, it's a place of flow. Things come in, get transformed, and are consumed day after day without interruption. This daily discipline, quiet and consistent, is perhaps the most powerful preservation method of all.